Peter Major is with Modern Corporate Solutions and our go-to guy when it comes to anything to do with mining. Indeed, Peter will be at the Biz News conference in March, delivering a keynote to tell us what mining stocks are worth buying, what you should avoid, and why you shouldn't go overboard. But we'll be talking today about another conference and other issues in the mining sector. So the mining world is coming to Cape Town, Pete, just around the corner. The mining Indaba in Cape Town, not to be confused with the Joburg mining Indaba, which Bernard Swanepoel runs. This one is owned by Euro. Is it Euro Money that owns this conference?
There's actually 5 Indabas coming to Cape Town. Starts with the ferroalloys and steel and manganese. Then it goes into coal. Then you have the big one simultaneous with the 1-to-1, which is really just producers and investors. That's held up behind the Mount Nelson. And then there's another one. I don't know if I should be advertised. Well, I should, because they invited me to it. There's another parallel one that specials on just having talks scattered around the different hotels. And the talks are with pretty senior mining execs, government execs, and people in the news that their opinion counts for something. So yeah, there's 5 Indabas simultaneous, just about, over a 2-week period. And man, could they not ask for better timing?
Well, why? Why is the timing so good?
Because mining has kicked the pee out of everything except AI the world over the last 12, 13 months. And definitely the last 6. Only some of the AI stocks in the big 7 have beaten mining. And look, they haven't beat all the mining. Precious metals are the darlings, as you know. Anything to do with silver, anything to do with PGMs, anything to do with gold. Now, copper and tin are right behind gold. In fact, we talked about gold leveling off before, you and I. Well, it has leveled off, Alec. Copper's now beat gold for the last 10, 11 months. The JSE Aussie has now beaten gold for the last 12 months. So they've all done great. But when you're talking relative performance, this shows the gold. I'm not going to call it a balloon, but like the gold rocket, it's kind of gone ballistic. It's kind of leveling off. And now a lot of the others are playing catch up.
Is there a good reason for it when you look around the world and you see what's going on in Iran, the issue with Venezuela? It does appear as though Donald Trump, the great disruptor, is doing his very best to help the precious metals operations.
He is, Alec, and I'm not sure if it's inadvertent or if it's willful, because we've talked about the paper markets controlling mining for 30 years. People started this after Bunker Hunts got taken out back in 1980. They said it was pure paper market intervention that took them out and that kept metal prices low. And I think there's a lot of credibility in that. And now we're waking up to the fact, just because one big country can print all the currency at once, because the biggest commodities exchange in Chicago can short it all they want, and they've always got the legislators to back them up. They don't have to cover. They get the terms extended when they want. Now it's a multipolar world. And it looks to me like, starting with China, they're kind of calling bluffs. They said, we've needed commodities to build this country, and we deal in real things. We make real things. And we don't need money to falsely say we got a growing economy. Now, the States isn't just a one-horse pony show, but why is silver going up? Why are platinums going up? South Africa loves bragging, we got enough platinum to take care of the world for 1,000 years. But the people that brag that the most don't know how to get it out of the ground, and that is our government. And so what's happened over decades, the market is kind of balanced. Supply and demand is balanced. And the disrupting factor in that is always your investment component, like gold. Yes, there's jewelry, there's some industrial use, there's coins, but it's the investing component that swings the prices. And the platinum price doesn't shoot up because all of a sudden General Motors is producing more cars than last year, or because Anglo-American Platinum had a real successful campaign in Taiwan or China, and now they're buying more platinum jewelry. Yeah, that has some kind of effect. But these big effects we're seeing now, they are investors, speculators, traders. They don't want to be caught short. And the rumors are strong rumors from credible people now. 5 big banks are short, backing Chicago, 5 billion ounces of silver. And the world doesn't even produce 1 billion a year, and that's committed to mostly industrial uses. So where are they going to get the silver? Sure, people have it in their safes. India's got 5 billion. They're not in a rush to sell it. So yeah, Donald Trump has kind of shaken things up, but maybe he's brought the whole world into reality. And I think if I can throw this in, he mentions we're going to fix the Venezuelan oil industry. And the money's going to go to the people. The oil's going to go to the people. But you've probably seen the results of that impromptu meeting he called with all the oil execs in America, Alec. They had a cold shower for Donald. Not one of the top 4 wants to go in there. And they gave him a lot of good reasons why. We've been nationalized 3 times. The place has been run into the ground. How do we know we're going to show a return on investment? And so that's a wake-up call for places like South Africa. Even if we had a regime change tomorrow, the foreigners are not going to rush in here to open up these deep-level gold mines that Oppenheimer meticulously built and funded. It's uninvestable. So a lot of parallels between Venezuela, and they started nationalizing their industry after we did. So it shows our mines, our deep-level gold mines, they're probably worse shape than Venezuelans' oil wells.
There are people listening to this saying, come on, Peter, we haven't nationalized anything in South Africa.
Well, how much investment have we had since the MPRDA came? Can you imagine, Alec? You've worked your whole life, decades, building the most modern, efficient plant. And then you wake up one day and they tell you your plant might be sitting on some dirt, but you don't own any of that dirt. And if you do everything we tell you, we might let you utilize it for 20 years, 25 years, and then we'll decide if we want to renew it. Well, mines are 100-year investments. So are you happy investing now? Somebody else took away your minerals, but they'll let you borrow them with a lot different conditions and terms than the day before they nationalized your minerals.
Yeah, and that's something that just does not register with Pretoria. It doesn't register with the mindset that the ANC has, or indeed that South Africa has. The point you make about Venezuela is very interesting. If there is a reluctance by the American oil majors to go into the greatest oil deposits on earth, you wonder what's going to happen to them. What is, if they're not going to go in, would America perhaps create an oil state company?
America should have learned something from Afghanistan and Iraq. Is you got to plan meticulously every possible contingency before you go in. And taking out one person in Venezuela, how can that really change things, Alec? One of the amazing statistics that really parallels South Africa is Venezuela has 2,500 generals. And we've been hearing how many hundreds and hundreds, maybe we got 1,000 generals here, but that's the problem. Those generals are used to a certain lifestyle, much like Xi Jinping is finding out in China. The generals in China, they're used to be industrialists, and he's trying to change that. He's trying to reassert civilian control over the military. But yeah, Venezuela, all these vested interests. Even if Mr. Ramaphosa resigned tomorrow, is it going to change anything? We still have the construction mafia here. We still have the taxi mafia. We still have the same people minus zero. So regime change means a lot more than just the top person has to go. There's millions of people that have built a lifestyle in this country that didn't exist prior to 1994, and it's not the lifestyle that builds a country. We've seen Guimeti's study at Wits, huh? We've spent $1 trillion on 100 BEs, that's 10 billion each, and he can't find any of them to put anything back in. Not one of them has started something a fraction of what Anglo American, JCI, Rand Mines, or any of them did.
There was an article that Rob Hersoff wrote that we published on Biz News this week, very popular. More than 100,000 people have read it, which is quite big for a nation that doesn't read much. In fact, I think that's about as many people as who read books in our country. 100,000. The executive CEO of Executive Books told me that once. And in it, he says that Gwede Mantashe has destroyed the mining industry in South Africa. He said that Gwede phoned him and said, I used to work at Anglo Val, your family's business. Why are you being so nasty to me? Why are you attacking me? And Rob said, I'm not attacking. I'm telling you the truth. And I guess there's a bit of, on the one hand, bit of truth to power. On the other hand, it's interesting that Gwede is taking notice and, in fact, cares enough to phone Rob.
Gwede did work for Anglo Val, and he used to brag up how he brought Prieska to its knees. And now he's got the power to help Prieska take off, but he finds out his power is elusive. He doesn't have the power over his own branches. So, yeah, no, they love saying how they took on the mining houses, but what are you taking them on for? To lose 400,000 jobs? To destroy a gold industry that will never be replicated by anybody? Can you imagine? We produce 650 tons of gold for decades. Can you imagine if we were producing 600 tons today instead of 85, 90? This country would be richer than Venezuela.
So what happens then to a Gwede Mantashe who's clearly reading the article and saying, no, Rob Hersoff, you've been unfair to me? Does he get a wake-up call? Is it too late in his life or in the ANC's rule to do anything about this?
I always say, late is better than never. If you're still breathing and you can still lift up that pistol and put it to your head or put it to the bad guy's head, it's not too late. It's very late. I'm not saying Gwede needs to shoot himself, but maybe Gwede should read Lee Iacocca's first book, because Lee Iacocca got fired from Ford. He thought it was for being too successful, bumped heads with Mr. Ford, didn't know what he's going to do with his life. He's 60 years old, and he was at the pinnacle of his life. And there was a man running Chrysler, and Chrysler was a good company. It had made some wrong decisions, but it was a good company employing tens of thousands of people. I don't think it had 100, but it probably had close to 100,000 people, tens of thousands. And Ricardo was an accountant, and he was a good guy. And he tried what he could to save Chrysler, and he couldn't. And he went to Lee Iacocca. He says, you can save this. You have the skills. You have the contacts. I don't. Ricardo blew himself out of the water, and he put Iacocca in there. And people said, oh, the embarrassment, the shame. Ricardo's the one that saved Chrysler, every bit as much as Lee Iacocca did. Kind of a funny thing is, the longer Lee was in there, the more he realized this place is much worse than I thought. I never would have taken this job. He says, every day there's another freaking bonfire going on. He had to pinch something like 18, 20 vice presidents from Ford that he worked with. And the hardest one he had was head of, I think it was Ford South America. He was based in Venezuela. The guy was living like a king. Venezuela was such a great place then. And the guy says, I could never have a lifestyle like this in America. The company's doing great. The people love me. My wife, my friends love it. Why do I want to go back to Michigan in the wintertime for a company that's probably going to fail? And Lee said that was his toughest bit of saving. That was getting the guy to leave Venezuela and come back and help him. But it was a great story. Gwede could do something like that if he cared about the country and the industry and the people that he put out of work.
What about Iran? Are you following the story there?
Alec, I can't pray hard enough for the people to reassert what they deserve. I was at university with a lot of Iranians, Montana School of Mines back in the 70s, 77, 78, 79, 80. I had a lot of Iranian friends. And we would watch that kind of joking. When are you guys going back? They were terrified of going back. You can imagine why, what they saw on TV, 78, 79, 80. Maybe they were spoiled. Maybe they were rich. They were smart. geez, they were smart. They were the top grades in calculus, physics. They'd obviously had good education. Top of the class, in many of the classes I had, they were at the top. The Persians are not an ignorant race. They could argue they were the first civilized race on the planet. And I've got friends, I've got a couple of relatives that visit there. My brother's son goes there, loves it. I've got mining friends that go there, they love it. The people, I can't pray hard enough that the people regain control of that country.
It is a real crisis that's occurring at the moment. And if you think of, we know in South Africa how difficult it is when you have unrest. They have unrest, but they are just shooting people. 12,000 people on one day, according to documentation that has now come out of the country. But from a mining perspective, is there any impact on the mining world and what's going on in Iran right now?
Not too much, because they've been sanctioned so hard and their oil production is shrunken a lot. Not as much as Venezuela relative. Venezuela's not producing a third of what it did when it was a normal country. But I think Iran's probably producing less than half. They could double production. And mining, I've heard stories of friends of mine that have been there telling me about the deposits there. But you got to believe the infrastructure there is probably as bad as Venezuela's. But let's not end this on a negative. Where was infrastructure worse than the DRC and Zambia? And we know what happened. They had regime changes there at the end of the previous millennium. And I keep repeating, both those countries have received international money in the tens of billions. They're continuing to receive probably 5-10 billion a year. That's investment, foreign investment. So if they can do it, can we do it? Yes, we can. If we have the will. That's all we're lacking, is the will at the top to do it.
Well, let's hope that some of these messages are actually landing in Pretoria where they need to. I want to change tack a little. There was a production update from Northam, which got me looking at Northam Platinum. Now, there's a company that you know well. It's almost becoming, though, it seems to be a chrome producer that happens to have platinum as a bonus. And the market loves it. The rating of this stock is so high. In fact, I did my intrinsic value numbers, and it's above my intrinsic value. So I certainly wouldn't be a buyer at these levels. But I'd love to get an insight on what the expert makes of Northam.
Northam's run by an incredible individual who's put together a pretty amazing team. And no, I'll recheck my numbers, Alec. They're not a chrome producer that produced platinum, but Teresa, the Perulis mine, very much is that. Depending on what the current platinum price is, what the current chrome price is, Teresa is literally a 50-50 producer. And Lucas and his son built it that way. They planned it that way. They financed it that way. And yes, Teresa is really the darling now because it's had a much poorer rating than the big established players. And man, they're talking about getting this big 400,000 PGM ounce a year producer going in Zimbabwe. That is almost not a mouse trying to swallow an elephant, but maybe a small pony trying to. But if they do that, it'll be an incredible feat. And anyone that knows the Perulises knows they think big and they tough it out. They are not fly-by-nighters. They're not pump and dumps. Northam, Paul's an incredible mining engineer, an incredible CEO. If there's anybody that doesn't pull punches when you talk, it's that guy. So you can take shorthand with Paul because he doesn't have excess verbiage, but you better make sure you take down every word correctly. It means something. And if you just look at the way he's run that company through the cycle, through the down cycle, through the up cycle, hates overpaying for assets. That's why we thought poor Paul had lost it, when he put in that big bid and went to war with Impala on the Bafokeng. It's only when you really analyze how that bid was structured and what his bolt hole was in case PGMs fell down, well thought out. And boy, do our platinum producers shove out the chrome. I know that the government loves showing, oh, mining's not really dying in South Africa. Look at this. Look at our chrome. It's hitting all-time highs. Well, it is. There's a couple reasons for it. One is because we don't have ferrochrome smelters anymore. So the only way a mine can stay alive, you can't sell to a local smelter, just like our iron ore producers can't sell to ISCOR now. So they're selling to our competitors. But the other reason is the PGM miners in those years of toughing out low PGM prices really perfected how they can get chrome out of that ore, which is great. When you go to all that trouble and you disrupt the earth to dig minerals out of the ground, you owe it to yourself, your shareholders, everybody, to recover everything to the best of your ability. Economically, yes. And boy, South African PGM producers know how to economically get the chrome out now, that fine chrome that nobody could use, nobody could sell. I think they're now producing more than not quite, but almost more than the flat out pure chrome producers. So that's, it's a real plus, Alec, but I don't think it's, other than Teresa, I don't think it's 20% of revenue. I think it's closer to 12 or 14. But hey, you could say that's 14% pure margin. My PGMs cover the cost.
Yeah, and really that is, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but certainly chrome has become very important now to the platinum companies and platinum miners. It's been an interesting week, the past week, for resources stocks. We had a phenomenal run this week already. The PGM's doing well, gold's doing well. Is it getting to a point? We spoke about gold last week where you showed us lots of graphs and you showed us that how historically gold is in very overbought territory. Are we starting to get anywhere near to that as far as the mining stocks and particularly the precious mining stocks are concerned?
I think we're way into it, Alec. Each week, each time I review gold's relative performance to other commodities, to other alternative investments, property, bonds, cash, it's leveling off. I quoted some figures when we just started here. Yeah, the Aussie's beaten it for 11 months. How many people on the street would tell you that? How many people would tell you, well, copper's actually beat gold the last 10 months? And so more and more of these alternative investments are beating it. They're outperforming it. Doesn't mean gold's not going up, but it's going up at a much reduced rate compared to a lot of the other investments that have literally been left behind. Gold was on a rocket, and it took everybody else a while to catch up. But look how quick platinum caught up. In less than 6 months, the platinum price doubled. And palladium just about, rhodium. So silver, it's tripled, I think. And so, yeah, that's a sign of leveling off. Doesn't mean it's going to fall down, but it means the others are playing catch up. And so an astute fund manager, they would have been picking up on that and trying to switch from one rocket to another. You definitely don't want to be on the first stage of the rocket. You know what happens when it cuts loose and that one goes parachuting to Earth and the other two stages keep going. That's the game. That's the business of fund management. When the first stage starts running out of fuel, you want to shoot across to the next stage that's going to go for another extended period of time. And then you're going to watch, when is that one now gone further than the fundamentals justify? So yes, I think it's, and the share prices are showing that, Alec. If you look at the price of Goldfields, Anglo Gold, Durban Deep, Pan African, those shares, they hit higher prices a month or two ago. Harmony, it hit its best price 4 months ago. So the gold price is a lot higher now, but Harmony's not. So they're showing, the shares react quick. They anticipate what's happening. And look, a lot of that's because of the rand strengthening as well. But there's a lot of indicators. It's not just me having a bad day saying, oh, gold's got to level off. I'm basing that on the facts that I see in front of me, on all the relative investments.
Getting back to the Indaba, which is just around the corner, a notable absentee, or will he be, is Mark Bristow. Have you had a chance to talk to Mark since his departure from Barrick? He was a great fan of the Indaba, often would come along and spend a bit of time in his home country?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him, Alec. I would relish the opportunity to, and I hope he comes down. I don't think he's got any enemies. I I may have badmouthed him a couple times when he was with Kebble and costing us all a lot of money, and it wasn't him. He stayed in there. He may have been a junior geologist, I thought, a little over his head when he first took the reins, but geez, he had more battle wounds, good experiences, and did he prove it with Kibali? You know, did he prove it in Africa? He's he's definitely a rare individual, and I don't know what the reasoning was. I've read what it is that he maybe had bumped heads too much with the junta in Mali, and sometimes that does happen. You know, you're too familiar and you can't make the headway you want. But maybe that was the only way Thornton thought, I'm going to break this deadlock. Because their richest assets were in Mali. But he's got nothing to be sheepish or embarrassed about. I thought he did a great job, and he's a mind builder. He wasn't going to gamble on the corporate finance, which works. You can buy all the assets you want. If that commodity price keeps going up, you look like a genius. And if it goes down, you can wipe the company out. So he wasn't on to hedging. He wasn't into corporate mergers and acquisitions unless they made real sense. And he built great mines, and from scratch.
And another one of the mining giants of South Africa, a guy who really knows the industry well, Neil Froneman, will be with you at the BizNews conference in March. And presumably, although he's left Sibanye-Stillwater, he'll be knocking around the Indaba, no doubt. When you bump into him, what are you going to be asking him about?
Look, the standard question is, come on, Neil, what are you really into? And they do have a problem with that. We see the executives from Anglo American do it. You get on the boards of companies, but it's not really the job that you're used to. Being on the board, you're one of 10, one of 15. So you give some insights. Does anybody listen? Does anybody care? These are guys that are these are people used to taking control with both their hands and their feet. And they take the good with the bad. And so I've heard a couple people tell me they've got Neil to agree to go on their board. And I said, that's great. You guys cannot lose by having him there. But I'd be curious to hear, how many boards do you think you can take on, Neil? And why have you chosen the ones you have? I know what his hobbies are. They're cars, and they're shooting, flying. He's almost got too many hobbies. Now he's got time to pursue them. And you can't do both. You can't pursue hobbies and really be an exec of a mining company and make things happen. That takes 24/7 attention. But yeah, I'm keen to talk to Neil. He's done a lot. He's done so much, from local to international, to getting out of gold, getting into platinum, to staying with gold. I shouldn't say getting out of gold. He stayed in gold, but he branched out, diversified into platinum. Great move. That turned out better than I ever imagined. Okay, the base metals weren't so good, the lithium, but hey, there's about 70,000 people with jobs now that may not have had it. They almost certainly wouldn't have had it if Neil hadn't taken the reins at Gold One and worked his way up. And for that, we got to be thankful.
David Shapiro was bemoaning the departure of the titans, the business titans. Well, I think he would be even more bemoaning the departure of Neil Froneman, because, as you say, he has made a huge impact and created, through his energy, his risk-taking, thousands and thousands of jobs. Pete, just to finish off with the Indaba, there's usually a theme. There's usually something that people are talking about. It's not what's on the official agenda. What is going to be the big talking point, do you think, over the next week?
I think it's going to be U.S. investing in critical minerals. I've seen a lot of the talks coming through like that. And I'm just picking up, I'm on Bloomberg's, I'm on a couple of mining chat lines. And that's the most common theme I'm seeing, Alec, is the U.S. realizes China has the critical minerals and we don't. And we've allowed it. And man, if you see the deals they've done, gee, I wish I was on the other side of those deals because they are paying like they're not afraid of printing money. You know, they're paying like Donald Trump's the one running the cash register. They're securing rare earth contracts at what is close to the all-time high, and they're guaranteed for 10 years. You know, I want to sell a mine to the U.S. Critical Mineral Investment Committee. I think that's, I'm just guessing, but I think that's going to be one of the main topics is everybody wants to show, hey, we have minerals. They're not committed to China, Russia, others. The states can have them. Come on in. That's what I think. But talk to me in another week or two. I'll have a better idea.
No doubt. But it does also show the opportunity, the window of opportunity for South Africa.
Oh, boy,
if we didn't have to go to war or go to at least verbal war with the Americans right now, because they've got open checkbooks. They've got a much bigger checkbook than we have. And it is an opportunity now for South Africa to, I suppose, cash in an area where it really has been lagging.
You know, it's kind of like a gambler all of a sudden gets a chance to redeem himself, you know, and he can't forgive and fix everything that he's desolated. But this is a unique and powerful opportunity for South Africa to do what it takes to get in good with America and get that. Because when the Pentagon's spending money, they're not looking like the return on investment like all your banks and your other mining firms all over the world. They're looking at securing supply. And boy, they're willing to overlook a lot of things that maybe the politicians weren't previously willing to overlook. And that's the situation we're in now, Alec. Sure, we bumped heads with them a few times, but there's nothing stopping the ANC from sitting down and saying, guys, we want to fix some of the past that you don't like, and we want to build a super future, and we want your guys' involvement in this, you know? And the states can. They're willing to write big checks, and they're not going to look at the ROIs like even the Chinese do. That's a unique opportunity. That is a one-off opportunity. And they got to grab it with both hands starting today.
Peter Major with some sage advice for Pretoria. He's with Modern Corporate Solutions. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.